Standing in the funeral parlor watching my mother's peaceful face in the mahogany casket, I never expected this moment to become the scene of my greatest triumph. The heavy scent of lilies filled the air when she walked in. My sister Jessica, wearing a designer black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her arm linked with a man I once thought I would marry. Christopher Wellington, my former millionaire fiancé who shattered my world 6 years ago. But today, as I watched her flash that enormous diamond ring and prepare to deliver what she thought would be her final blow, I could not help but smile. Before I continue this story, let me know in the comments what city you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that every betrayal comes with its own price. Because the story I'm about to tell will show you that sometimes losing what you think you want opens the door to something far more incredible than you ever imagined. 6 years ago, I was 32 years old running a successful interior design business in downtown Seattle and living what I thought was a fairy tale romance. Christopher Wellington was everything a woman could want on paper. At 35, he was the CEO of Wellington Real Estate Development, a company worth $50 million that specialized in luxury high-rise buildings throughout the Pacific Northwest. We had been dating for 3 years when he proposed to me at Daniel's Broiler, one of Seattle's finest restaurants, with a breathtaking 5-carat diamond ring that caught the light like captured starlight. Our relationship had started when he hired my company to design the interior of his newest residential building. I remember walking into his corner office on the 40th floor, nervous about presenting my portfolio to someone so successful and intimidating. Christopher had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished, and green eyes that seemed to see right through you. When he smiled and told me my designs were exactly what he had been looking for, I felt like I was floating. Those 3 years together were filled with romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to his cabin in the San Juan Islands, and late-night conversations about our dreams for the future. Christopher talked about expanding his business internationally, maybe starting a family, buying a house in Tuscany for our retirement. I was completely swept up in the vision of our life together. The wedding planning consumed my life for months. We had booked the Ritz-Carlton for a ceremony that would host 200 of Seattle's most influential people. I had spent countless hours choosing the perfect flowers, selecting a 3-tier cake from the city's most renowned bakery, and designing custom invitations on cream-colored paper with gold embossing. Everything had to be perfect for what I believed would be the most important day of my life. My sister Jessica seemed genuinely excited to help with the preparations. At 40, she was 2 years older than me, working as a registered nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital and raising her 8-year-old son Tommy as a single mother. Jessica had always struggled financially, and I often helped her out when Tommy needed new school clothes or when her car needed repairs. She would come over to my apartment several times a week, supposedly to help address invitations or make centerpieces, always bringing Tommy along to play in my spare room. But about 3 months before the wedding date, things started to change in ways that made my stomach twist with uneasiness. Christopher began working later hours, claiming that a major deal required his constant attention. He would come home smelling different, not like his usual cologne, but something sweeter, more floral. When I asked about it, he would kiss my forehead and say he had been meeting with female clients all day, that it was probably their perfume I was detecting. Our intimacy started to decline gradually. Christopher would roll over and go to sleep without our usual closeness, claiming exhaustion from work stress. When I suggested we move our wedding date from spring to fall, saying he needed more time to close several major deals, I agreed because I wanted to be supportive. Looking back, every red flag was waving right in front of my face, but I was so blinded by love and trust that I convinced myself these were normal pre-wedding jitters. Jessica continued to be incredibly helpful during this time, which I appreciated more than ever given Christopher's increased absence. She would stay late into the evening, helping me organize vendor contracts and finalize seating charts. Sometimes I would find long auburn hairs in my bathroom that did not belong to me, since my hair was blonde and much shorter. When I mentioned this to Jessica, she laughed and said she must have used my bathroom while I was on phone calls with caterers. The unraveling began 2 weeks before what should have been my wedding day. I had decided to surprise Christopher at his office with lunch from his favorite Italian restaurant, something I had not done in months due to his increasingly busy schedule. I took the elevator to the 40th floor, balancing the takeout bags and a bottle of his preferred wine, imagining how his face would light up when I walked through his door. But when I reached his office, I found his secretary's desk empty and his door slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could hear voices, including one that made my blood run cold. It was Jessica's voice, breathy and intimate in a way that made my heart start racing. I pushed the door open just enough to see inside, and what I witnessed shattered every assumption I had about my life. Jessica was emerging from Christopher's private bathroom, her hair disheveled and her lipstick completely gone. Her nurse's uniform was wrinkled, and she was smoothing down her skirt with hands that shook slightly. Christopher was adjusting his tie, his face flushed in a way that told me everything I needed to know about what had just happened in that bathroom. When they saw me standing in the doorway with lunch bags in my hands, both of their faces went white. Jessica recovered first, forcing a bright smile and saying she had stopped by to discuss surprise plans for my bachelorette party. Christopher nodded eagerly, adding that Jessica had some wonderful ideas that she wanted to run past him first. The lies rolled off their tongues so easily that I wondered how long they had been practicing this deception. I set the lunch bags down on Christopher's desk with hands that barely functioned and told them I was suddenly feeling ill, that I needed to go home. Jessica offered to drive me, but I declined, saying I needed to be alone. During the elevator ride down 40 floors, I felt like I was descending into hell, my mind racing with questions about how long this betrayal had been happening under my nose. That evening, I could not eat dinner or focus on anything except the terrible suspicion growing in my chest. I called my friend Maria, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown, and asked if she knew any reliable private investigators. She gave me the contact information for Marcus Rodriguez, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases. When I called Marcus that night and explained my situation, he told me he could have answers within a week. What Marcus uncovered over the next 7 days destroyed every remaining piece of trust I had in both Christopher and my sister. Using surveillance techniques and financial records, he discovered that Christopher and Jessica had been meeting at the Four Seasons Hotel every Tuesday and Friday afternoon for the past 8 months. Christopher had been paying for these rooms with a credit card linked to our joint checking account, meaning I had been unknowingly funding their affair. The financial betrayal cut even deeper when Marcus showed me receipts for expensive gifts Christopher had purchased for Jessica using our shared money. A $15,000 Cartier bracelet, a designer handbag worth $8,000, and several pieces of lingerie from boutiques I could never afford on my own income. He had been systematically draining our wedding fund to shower my sister with luxury items. Marcus also provided me with photographs that made me physically sick. Images of Christopher and Jessica holding hands as they walked into the hotel, kissing passionately in the lobby, and emerging hours later looking satisfied and intimate. In one particularly devastating photo, Jessica was wearing the engagement ring Christopher had given me while wrapped in his arms outside the hotel entrance. The night before what should have been my wedding day, I confronted Christopher in our shared apartment. I spread Marcus's photographs across our dining room table like evidence in a courtroom and demanded the truth. Christopher's defense crumbled immediately. He sat down heavily in his chair and admitted that he had fallen in love with Jessica, that what we had together felt stale compared to the excitement he felt with her. He told me that Jessica understood him in ways I never could, that she appreciated his success without trying to change him or push him toward marriage. The irony of that statement was not lost on me, considering we were supposed to be married the next morning. Christopher explained that he had been trying to find the courage to call off the wedding for weeks, but he had not wanted to hurt me. Instead of calling me personally to cancel our wedding, Christopher sent a mass email to all 200 guests at 11 o'clock that night, stating that the wedding was postponed indefinitely due to unforeseen personal circumstances. I spent my wedding morning in my apartment still wearing my pajamas while catering staff and florists tried to reach me to understand what had happened to their carefully planned event. Jessica moved into Christopher's downtown penthouse apartment 1 week later, bringing Tommy and their few possessions from the small rental house they had been sharing. She quit her job at the hospital, claiming that Christopher wanted to support her so she could focus on being a full-time mother and partner. The speed with which she transitioned from my sister and wedding helper to Christopher's live-in girlfriend told me that this decision had been planned far in advance. 6 years passed before I saw either of them again. During that time, I threw myself into rebuilding both my business and my emotional life through months of therapy and the support of true friends. The interior design company I'd started grew into one of Seattle's most respected firms, specializing in sustainable luxury design for high-end clients throughout the region. My mother had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months before she died, and throughout her illness, Jessica rarely visited or offered help with medical appointments or household tasks. I spent most of my free time driving Mom to chemotherapy sessions, organizing her medications, and making sure she was comfortable during her final months. When Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in October, Jessica's first concern was whether she would inherit any valuable jewelry or family heirlooms. The funeral service was held at St. Mary Cathedral, where our family had attended Christmas and Easter services throughout our childhood. I had arranged everything according to Mom's wishes: white roses instead of lilies, classical music instead of hymns, and a reception afterward at the parish hall where people could share memories over Mom's favorite lemon cake recipe. I was standing near the front of the church, greeting mourners and accepting condolences when I heard the click of expensive heels on marble flooring. I turned around to see Jessica walking down the center aisle with Christopher beside her, both of them dressed in designer black clothing that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Jessica looked different than I remembered. Her auburn hair was now professionally styled and highlighted, swept up in an elegant chignon that showcased diamond earrings. Her black dress was clearly designer, fitted perfectly to her figure, and she carried a Hermès handbag that I recognized from fashion magazines. Most noticeably, her left hand displayed an enormous diamond ring that caught the cathedral's stained glass light like a disco ball. Christopher had aged well, his salt and pepper hair now completely silver in a way that made him look even more distinguished. His black suit was obviously custom-tailored, and he wore a watch that I was certain cost more than most cars. They moved through the church like celebrities arriving at a premiere, drawing attention and whispered comments from other mourners. After the service, during the reception in the parish hall, Jessica approached me while I was arranging leftover flowers in memory vases for elderly church members to take home. She had been drinking wine, and her voice carried that slightly sharp edge that alcohol always gave her when she wanted to be cruel. "Well, look at you, Amber," she said loud enough for nearby mourners to hear. "Poor you, still alone at 38. Meanwhile, look what I have accomplished." She held up her left hand so the enormous diamond ring caught the overhead lights. "Christopher bought me this $20,000 ring just last month. We are planning our honeymoon in Tuscany, staying at the same villa where George Clooney got married." She continued her monologue, describing their life in Christopher's penthouse, the vacation home they had purchased in the San Juan Islands, and the luxury cars in their garage. "I got the man, the money, and the mansion, Amber. Everything you thought would be yours. And honestly, Christopher told me he feels like he dodged a bullet by not marrying you. He said you were always too demanding, too focused on changing him instead of appreciating what he offered." Throughout Jessica's performance, I remained calm, continuing to arrange flowers while she spoke. When she finally paused to take another sip of wine, I looked up at her with a gentle smile and said, "Actually, I would love for you to meet my husband." Jessica's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. "Your husband? You never mentioned getting married. When did this happen? Who is he? What does he do for work?" Instead of answering her questions, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Darling," I said when he answered, "could you please come inside? I would love for you to meet my sister and her partner." Jessica and Christopher both turned toward the parish hall entrance as the door opened. The man who walked in commanded attention immediately, not through flashiness or expensive clothing, but through the quiet confidence that comes with real power and success. He was tall, probably 6 feet 4 inches, with silver hair and kind blue eyes behind designer glasses. His black suit was understated but clearly custom-made, and everything about his presence suggested both wealth and substance. Christopher's face went completely pale when he recognized who was approaching us. "That's William Harrison." he whispered to Jessica, his voice tight with something that might have been panic. Jessica's mouth fell open as she recognized the name. William Harrison was the chairman and CEO of Harrison Financial Group, a private equity firm that managed investments worth $2.8 billion. His photograph appeared regularly in Forbes magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and he was known throughout the Pacific Northwest as one of the region's most successful and influential businessmen. What neither Jessica nor Christopher knew, but what Christopher was about to learn, was that Harrison Financial Group owned the building where Christopher's office was located, along with several other properties that housed his business operations. Christopher's company owed William's firm approximately $12 million in various loans and lease agreements, making Christopher essentially a tenant in William's business empire. William approached our small group with the easy grace of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. He slipped his arm around my waist and kissed my cheek gently before extending his hand to Jessica and Christopher. "You must be Amber's sister," he said to Jessica with genuine warmth. "I am so sorry for your loss. Amber has told me wonderful stories about your mother." The silence that followed William's introduction stretched uncomfortably long. Christopher cleared his throat several times, clearly struggling to process the fact that his former fiancé was married to the man who essentially controlled his financial future. Jessica's face had gone through several color changes, from surprise to confusion to something approaching fear, as she began to understand the implications of what she was witnessing. I had never planned for this moment to unfold at my mother's funeral, but life has a way of creating its own sense of justice and timing. As I stood there with William's arm around me, looking at the two people who had caused me such devastating pain 6 years earlier, I felt a profound sense of peace rather than triumph or revenge. My relationship with William had begun 4 years earlier at a charity gala for the Seattle Art Museum, an event I attended alone because I had not yet started dating again after the trauma of Christopher's betrayal. I was admiring a sculpture in the museum's garden when a distinguished gentleman approached and began discussing the artist's technique with knowledge that impressed me. We talked for hours that evening, covering everything from art to literature to our shared love of hiking in the Cascade Mountains. William was recently widowed, having lost his wife of 20 years to ovarian cancer, and he was slowly beginning to re-enter social situations after a long period of grief and isolation. He had built Harrison Financial Group from a small investment firm into one of the West Coast's most respected financial institutions, but success had not protected him from the pain of losing someone he loved deeply. Our courtship developed slowly and naturally over many months of dinners, theater performances, and long walks through Seattle's neighborhoods. William never rushed me or pressured me to move faster than felt comfortable. He understood that I had been deeply hurt by betrayal and needed time to rebuild my ability to trust. When he proposed 2 years later, it was during a quiet moment on his sailboat while we watched the sunset over Puget Sound, and his proposal felt like the most natural next step in a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Our wedding was small and private, held in William's garden with only close friends and family present. Unlike the elaborate spectacle I'd planned with Christopher, our ceremony focused on commitment and partnership rather than impressing others. William's 2 adult children from his first marriage welcomed me warmly, and I felt like I was joining a family rather than just getting married. One of the most beautiful, unexpected gifts of my marriage to William was his relationship with Lily, my 6-year-old daughter, from a previous relationship with an artist who had moved to New York before she was born. William embraced fatherhood with the same thoughtfulness he brought to everything else in his life. He never tried to replace Lily's biological father, but he became a steady, loving presence in her life, attending school events and bedtime story reading with the dedication of someone who chose to be her parent. Standing in that parish hall, watching Jessica and Christopher struggle to process this new information, I realized how completely my life had transformed since the day they betrayed me. The pain they had caused forced me to examine what I truly wanted from a partner and from life itself. Christopher had offered excitement and status, but William provided something far more valuable: security, respect, and a love that grew stronger rather than more fragile over time. Jessica finally found her voice, though it came out smaller and less confident than her earlier boasting. "I had no idea you were married, Amber. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell anyone in the family?" I explained that William and I had married 2 years earlier, but that I had chosen not to share details about my personal life with family members who had proven themselves untrustworthy. I mentioned that Mom had known about William and had spent several lovely afternoons in our garden during her healthier months, but that we had kept our relationship private to protect our happiness from outside interference. Christopher seemed to be calculating something in his head, probably trying to understand how his business relationships might be affected by this revelation. He stammered something about hoping there would be no conflict of interest between his company and Harrison Financial Group, but William graciously assured him that personal relationships never interfered with his firm's business decisions. What Christopher did not know, and what I learned only later from William, was that Christopher's real estate development company was already in serious financial trouble. Several of his recent projects had gone over budget due to poor planning and cost overruns, and he had been struggling to make loan payments to Harrison Financial Group for the past 18 months. William's firm had been considering foreclosure proceedings, but out of respect for the complicated personal situation, they had been more patient than normal business practices would typically allow. The irony of Jessica's boasting about Christopher's wealth was that most of it existed only on paper and in rapidly depreciating assets. The penthouse apartment she was so proud of living in was actually owned by the bank, with Christopher making barely minimum payments on an adjustable rate mortgage that would reset at much higher interest rates within the next year. The luxury cars and expensive jewelry were financed rather than owned outright, creating an illusion of wealth that was actually a house of cards built on increasingly unstable debt. As our conversation in the parish hall wound down, Jessica made one last attempt to maintain her superior attitude. She mentioned that she and Christopher were planning to expand his business internationally, maybe starting a family of their own, and purchasing that vacation home in Tuscany she had mentioned earlier. But her voice lacked the confidence it had carried when she first approached me, and I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression as she glanced between William and Christopher. Before we parted that day, William invited Jessica and Christopher to join us for dinner sometime soon, saying he would enjoy getting to know my family better. Christopher accepted the invitation with an enthusiasm that seemed slightly desperate, probably hoping to strengthen his business relationship with Harrison Financial Group through personal connection. Jessica agreed as well, though I could tell she was still processing the dramatic reversal of what she had expected to be her moment of triumph over me. As we drove home that evening in William's quietly luxurious sedan with Lily asleep in the back seat after the long day at the funeral, I reflected on how different my life had become from what I had once imagined. 6 years earlier, when Christopher and Jessica shattered my world, I thought I was losing everything that mattered. Instead, their betrayal redirected me towards something infinitely better than anything I could have planned for myself. I learned that betrayal, though painful, can redirect you toward what you are truly meant to have. Sometimes people do us the biggest favor by showing us who they really are before we are too deeply invested in the wrong relationship. The pain of discovering Christopher's affair with Jessica felt devastating at the time, but it ultimately saved me from a marriage that would have been built on his dishonesty and my naive trust. The following months brought news that confirmed William's earlier assessment of Christopher's financial situation. His real estate development company filed for bankruptcy protection, and Jessica found herself living in the small apartment they could afford after losing the penthouse and luxury cars. She returned to work as a nurse, and Christopher took a position as a sales associate with a small property management company. Their dreams of international expansion and Tuscan vacations disappeared along with the illusion of wealth that had never really belonged to them. Tommy, Jessica's son, came to live with William and me temporarily when Jessica struggled to manage work and single parenting during this difficult transition. He was angry with his mother for destroying our family relationships, and he needed stability during a confusing time in his young life. Having him in our home helped heal some of the family wounds that Jessica's choices had created, and it gave Lily a cousin to play with during an otherwise sad period. Today, as I stand in our garden, watching William teach Lily how to identify different types of roses while the Seattle skyline twinkles in the distance, I am grateful for every painful step that brought me to this moment. I understand now that sometimes losing what you think you want is actually the universe clearing space for something immeasurably better than you ever dared to imagine possible. What lessons have you learned from betrayal or unexpected life changes? Have you ever discovered that losing something painful actually opened doors to better opportunities? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please hit that like button if this story reminded you that every ending can become a beautiful beginning. Subscribe for more real-life stories about resilience and growth, and share this video with anyone who needs to remember that their current struggles might be guiding them toward their greatest happiness. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is never determined by how others choose to treat you. May you find the strength to trust that better days are always possible.